Good evening and welcome to the University of Adelaide for the 4th Sir John Downer Oration. This year's oration is to be delivered by the Honourable Josh Frydenberg MP, Treasurer of Australia. My name's Jenny Shaw and I'm Professor and Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts at the University of Adelaide, and it gives me great pleasure to act as your MC today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains and of the lands on which the University of Adelaide campuses here on North Terrace, Waite and Roseworthy were built, and I'd just like to pay my respects to all First Nations people in the room today. I would also like to acknowledge, and it's a very long list, the Honourable Josh Frydenberg MP, Treasurer of Australia, the Honourable Alan Tudge MP, Federal Minister for Population, Cities and Urban Infrastructure. I gather the Honourable Vicky Chapman is on her way. They've just finished work for the day. She, of course, has the role of the Deputy Premier and Attorney General and is representing the Premier tonight. The former Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Alexander Downer AC, and members of the Downer family. The former Premiers of South Australia, the Honourable John Olsen AO and the Honourable Dean Brown AO. Members of State and Federal Parliament, former Minister for Defence, the Honourable Christopher Pyne, former South Australian Cabinet Minister Joan Hall, the Honourable Cathy Branson ACQC, Acting Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, Professor Peter Rathjen AO, Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Adelaide, and Associate Professor Joy Rathjen. Mr Robert Champion de Crepney AC, former Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, and members of University Council and members of the university community. I would now like to invite the Vice-Chancellor and President, Professor Peter Rathjen, to welcome you to this event and to introduce our speaker. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Jenny, and I'm not going to go through that same list of distinguished guests that are with us tonight, but I would like to draw attention to a couple. Cathy Branson QC is here as my boss tonight. She's the Acting Chancellor of the University. Kev Scarce, who finds himself on the other side of politics, is currently in the Galapagos, so he's made an exit. But I want to say how pleased I am to see Robert Champion de Crepney back with us tonight. Robert was a Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, and it's great to have him with us. It's my pleasure tonight to officially welcome you all here for the 2019 Sir John Downer Oration. And you can see the importance of this event for us and for the University of Adelaide from the people who've chosen to come. 10 members of the Downer family, 4 current federal MPs, 2 former federal ministers, 4 state MPs, 2 former premiers, a former state minister. I just saw Christopher Pyne renewing acquaintances with Don Markwell. It's nice to bring these groups of people into our community to reflect on our history and to reflect on how our history might illuminate our future. But of course, what we honour with our presence tonight is the quality of our speaker today and the esteem in which our former Premier, Sir John Downer, and the Downer family more generally are held. And I do want to particularly acknowledge the Downer family who have contributed so much to our university, to our state, and to Australia. When the Downer family came to us with an idea of an oration to honour the contribution of Sir John Downer to South Australian and national politics, we enthusiastically agreed with the proviso that the contribution should come from distinguished and significant political figures. The oration was established in 2012 as a public lecture and has become a very special event on our calendar. Sir John Downer was, without question, a notable South Australian. He was a leading barrister before he entered politics. Throughout his political career, he pursued a range of social reforms that reflected his liberal values, including the Married Women's Property Act in the early 1880s and in federal parliament, opposing the White Australia policy. He was twice Premier of South Australia, then served a term in the new federal parliament as one of the first South Australian senators, returning to South Australian politics in 1905, where he served in the Legislative Council until his death in 1915. Beyond these public offices, Sir John also played a major role in the establishment of the constitutional debates of the 1890s. Together with Edmund Barton and Richard O'Connor, it says here, he was responsible for drafting the Australian Constitution during the Constitutional Convention here in Adelaide. Now I have to say I feel like something of a turncoat saying that, because I previously was at the University of Tasmania as Vice-Chancellor, and when you tell that story at the University of Tasmania, it's Inglis Clark that you credit with writing the Australian Constitution. Clearly it has many fathers and many states of origin. But over the history of the oration, we've been blessed to hear from a range of very important and powerful speakers. Former Australian Prime Minister, Honourable John Howard, gave the inaugural oration in 2012, followed by another Prime Minister, Tony Abbott. More recently, Julie Bishop, former Foreign Minister and former Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, and her sister is here with us tonight. Bringing this calibre of people into our university, into the community of Adelaide, is part of our role as a university, a role that we interpret as acting as the beating heart of Adelaide. Under our new strategic plan, Future Making, we ascribe to being not just commentators on society, but finding a new role as participants in society. And we've charged ourselves deliberately with the role of future maker for the future economic, social and cultural benefit of our state and of us all. Of becoming a cultural and intellectual centre, contributing to the debate on the important issues affecting us all, like we are here today. And in many other ways, engaging more deeply with the life of the city, bringing together learning, research, culture, entertainment and sport at the heart of a beautiful and livable city. We are reinvigorating our campuses. The fence came down today. And we're exploring new ways to draw people to join us, to hear from the leaders of our nation and other experts, to benefit from the knowledge that we bring to Adelaide and have ourselves, to socialise with us, to explore new ideas. And following on that list of outstanding speakers, it's a great honour to have with us tonight the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, to help celebrate Sir John's achievement and to contribute to our knowledge. Josh was elected to the Australian Parliament in 2010 as the member for Kooyong. He served in various roles in both the Abbott and Turnbull governments from 2013 to 2018, including as Minister for Resources in Northern Australia and as Minister for the Environment and Energy. In 2018, he was elected Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party and appointed Treasurer of Australia by Prime Minister Scott Morrison. His history's not all positive. He's got law and economics degrees, but they're from Monash University. And he completed his articles of clerkship at Mallesons, went on to graduate with a Master's in International Relations from Oxford and a Master's in Public Administration from Harvard. He's also been a Director of Global Banking at Deutsche Bank AG. Josh is also a human being. He's married and he met his wife Annie while they were out with friends at a bar in 2008. As Josh tells the story, she says she can't remember it at all. They married in 2010 and they've got 2 children, Gemma at 5 years old and Blake who's almost 3. And outside of politics, I think it's well known that Josh is a keen tennis player and in fact an outstanding tennis player. He represented Australia at the World University Games in England in 1991 and in the US in 1993. I've known him since before he was elected, when we were both a bit thinner, and I can tell you that he's a genuinely good person. So, Josh, a very warm welcome to the community of Adelaide and to the University of Adelaide tonight. You're now part of our tradition of bringing national leaders into our community to give us the benefit of your experience to inform debate around Australia's future. It gives me great pleasure now to invite the Treasurer, the Honourable Josh Frydenberg MP, to deliver the 4th Sir John Downer Oration.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. You did refer to my tennis, and it would be remiss of me to say I played a lot of tennis with Alexander Downer, but as a doubles partner, he made a very good foreign minister, I have to say that. Can I firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders past and present? Can I thank the Vice-Chancellor, the Acting Chancellor, for the invitation to be here? Can I acknowledge many of the dignitaries, including my parliamentary colleagues, Nicole Flint, Alan Tudge. I understand Tony Passon is here. The podcast extraordinaire, Christopher Pine, great to see you here. And also Matt Williams, a former colleague as well. John Olsen and I, we share the same hairdresser now. Great to see John, Dean Brown, Joan Hall, and many, many other distinguished members of the South Australian community, but particularly the Downer family, Nikki and Georgina, together with Alexander. They're people who I've known for many years. I count as the closest and dearest of friends, and I learned so much from Alexander Downer, both good and bad. But he was somebody with incredible conviction as Australia's longest-serving foreign minister, and he is somebody who always put the interests of the country first, who worked day and night, often with many personal sacrifices to deliver his role in the most effective way possible, and I think he's very much deserving of this country's support, encouragement and appreciation for a wonderful career of public service. Thank you very much. Well, Sir John Downer was born in Adelaide in 1843. His father, Henry Downer, was a tailor who had migrated to the colony of South Australia from England 5 years earlier on the sailing ship the Eden. Sir John enjoyed significant success in the law, but public service soon called. He entered political life in 1878, elected unopposed for the Barossa electorate, where he was returned in 8 successive elections. Sir John went on to serve South Australia in various capacities. He became South Australia's Attorney General in 1881 and served twice as Premier from 1885 to 1887 and then from 1892 to 1893. While Sir John oversaw the growth and development of South Australia, he also had a bigger vision, a national vision for the 6 colonies which were at that time basically separate countries. Returning from the Intercolonial Convention, the first in 1883, Sir John outlined to his dinner companions what he and others at the convention were seeking to achieve. And I quote, "We consider we have been rallying around all Australia to bring it together in that union, which is absolutely essential to the great confidence and to the greatness which we all anticipate for her." Sir John went on to play a major role in the subsequent debates and constitutional conventions that culminated in the Federation of Australia. He also served as one of the first South Australian senators in Australia's first Parliament. Sir John's legacy lives on, both in the enduring words of the Constitution that he had helped to develop, but also in the significant contributions he made by subsequent generations of his family to public life in Australia. Our journey towards federation is embodied in the life and the career of the statesman honoured in this biennial public lecture. So it is only appropriate that this evening I would like to discuss how our economy has changed since Federation, the challenges our economy faces today, how our Federation, with all its faults, has served us well, and how now all levels of government must work together to meet the challenges we face to ensure the prosperity of all Australians. The Australian economy has changed and transformed profoundly since Federation. It has become more diversified. At Federation, the agricultural sector made up around 20% of our economy, and the manufacturing sector made up around 12%. Since then, the services sector has been steadily increasing in size and today makes up almost 70% of our economy, while agriculture remains less than 3% of our economy. Our trading partners have shifted towards Asia. At the turn of the 20th century, the United Kingdom was our largest trading partner. Today, China is our largest trading partner, comprising over a quarter of Australia's trade in 2018. And there have been significant rises in life expectancy and in real incomes. In the first decades of the 1900s, life expectancy at birth was 55 years of age for men and 59 years of age for women. Today, life expectancy at birth is nearly 81 years for men and 85 years for women. Australia's per capita real gross national income is now 75% higher than it was in the 1990s and more than 3 times higher than the level it achieved in 1960. Australia is now the 14th largest economy in the world in US dollars. We have the 5th most traded currency in the world, and we're one of only 10 developed economies in the world to have a AAA credit rating from the 3 leading credit rating agencies. But today's economy is not without its challenges. Drought is continuing to be a major economic and social challenge, with over 95% of New South Wales and over 2/3 of Queensland drought affected. Farm GDP was down about 14% in 2018-2019, detracting nearly a quarter of a percentage point from our economic activity. The challenges posed by our hot and dry continent have been made all too clear by the recent bushfires ravaging parts of New South Wales and Queensland. Dwelling investment is also detracting from growth after making strong contributions between 2013 and 2017. As new dwellings have been built, the increase in housing supply has outpaced population growth, and this is likely to have contributed to the fall in housing prices from late 2017. Following price declines, new residential building approvals have fallen before picking up slightly in September. And global political and economic uncertainty is affecting business investment and growth. The International Monetary Fund has downgraded its global forecast for growth to 3% for 2019. This is slower than rates recently recorded, but it is still reasonable. Some countries face more challenges than others. Germany, the United Kingdom, South Korea and Singapore have all experienced negative quarters of economic growth this year. The trade dispute between the United States and China hovers over the global economy like a dark cloud. But the language from both countries, the United States and China, on trade has started to become a little bit more positive recently. The global economy also faces challenges of low inflation and slow wage growth, despite low unemployment and the low interest rate environment. Global demographics are a contributing factor that partly explain the low interest rate environment evident in the world today. As more people globally save for their retirement, global savings have increased, and this has resulted in surplus savings, which are driving down the price of funds and ultimately interest rates. More than 50 central banks from around the world have cut their interest rates this year, with Japan and some countries in Europe seeing their long-term bond rates now trading at negative yields. And around a quarter of all government bonds globally are now trading with negative yields. While interest rates remain low, global debt levels are being managed, but concerns are rising. Global debt levels have risen recently and now at a record high of $188 trillion, or 230% of global output. Countries that have high debt are more vulnerable to future shocks. Their ability to respond is more constrained, and the impact of any future shock is more amplified. In this global environment, the Australian economy has proven to be remarkably resilient, and there are reasons for us to be positive. We have supportive monetary policy settings, a strong fiscal position, and we are living within our means. The government has worked hard to rebuild the nation's finances. In 2013-14, when we came to government, some 5 years after the global financial crisis, the budget deficit that we inherited was the second highest in nominal terms in Australia's history. Since that time, the government has made steady progress to repair the budget and to chart a path back to balance. In 2018-19, the Commonwealth budget returned to balance for the first time in 11 years. The 2018-19 final budget outcome showed that we have kept our spending as a share of GDP at 24.6%. This is below the long-run average, and we have done so now for the second consecutive year, while also providing record levels of investment in essential services like hospitals, schools, and aged care. These results come down to responsible fiscal management. They demonstrate a steady commitment to a strong and flexible medium-term fiscal strategy. This is a strategy that ensures that our budget is on a sustainable footing. It's a strategy that shows we have a capacity to respond flexibly to unanticipated events and future challenges. It's how a strong fiscal position builds economic resilience and creates fiscal flexibility. A strong fiscal position is about paying down the debt that we have today in order to reduce what currently is a $19 billion a year interest bill. A strong fiscal position is about ensuring that Australians do not bear an unsustainable tax burden, keeping taxes as a share of GDP well below the 23.9% cap. Most importantly, it's about ensuring that we can guarantee the essential services that Australians rely on, while also putting the budget on a sustainable trajectory for future generations. If we were to respond to every call for increased spending from every corner, we would not be in a position to pay down the debt we inherited, to have the flexibility to respond to future shocks, and to provide the stability and the certainty that households and businesses require to consume and to invest. The stability and the certainty in policy settings give people the confidence to plan for their future. They can do so in the knowledge that the government will be not forced to impose punitive taxes or to dramatically cut funding for essential services. Importantly for the Australian economy, including here for South Australia, investment in our resource sector is starting to rise. And that comes after 6 years where it did not rise following the commodities boom. Mining investment grew by 2.4% in the June quarter, and it was only the sixth time in the last 24 quarters since the height of the mining boom in 2012-13. And there's been a major lift in mining exploration expenditure. More than $3.6 billion was spent on minerals exploration in 2018-19, and this represents an increase in real terms of around 15% on the previous year. There are signs that the Australian housing market has also stabilised. Combined capital city prices rose by 1.4% in October. This is the fourth consecutive monthly rise and was the largest monthly gain since May in 2015. The strongest gains continue to be in Melbourne and Sydney, but growth was broad-based in October, with all capital cities recording price increases except Perth. National auction clearance rates have also returned back to their early 2017 levels and are now tracking at around 70% compared to less than 50% this time last year. The Australian Treasury estimates that a 10% increase in house prices could result in a corresponding lift to GDP of about 0.5%. The labour market continues to be strong, with unemployment at 5.3% compared to 5.7% when we came to government. Employment growth in Australia today is more than double the OECD average and nearly 3 times what we inherited, with more than 1.4 million new jobs being created since we came to government in 2013. The participation rate in the workforce is near a record high, and the proportion of working-age Australians who are on welfare is now at a 30-year low. In other words, more people of working age remain attracted to looking for work and joining the workforce. The government's tax relief and the high levels of public infrastructure spending are also supporting the economy. We have delivered the biggest tax cuts in more than a decade as part of a package to create a stronger, simpler, flatter tax system. The Treasury have estimated that from 1920, the government's personal income tax plan will boost aggregate household disposable incomes by around $8 billion each year for the next 4 years. We've also delivered lower taxes for small and medium-sized businesses, and this includes lower company taxes 5 years earlier than originally planned, enabling nearly 1 million companies employing 5.2 million Australians to invest and to grow. And we're boosting investment through increasing the instant asset write-off to $30,000 and expanding it to all businesses with a turnover below $50 million. On public investment, we have a 10-year, $100 billion infrastructure plan which will see major new projects in every single state and territory. This record investment in transport will help boost our productivity. It will better connect people to jobs, their homes, their communities, and improve businesses' access to domestic and export markets. And it includes an additional $23 billion that was laid out in the 2019 budget. Our commitment to public infrastructure is creating thousands of jobs and increasing opportunities for local businesses. This is important for the longer-term productive capacity of the nation, as well as supporting the economy in the nearer term. But importantly, the government's economic plan also extends to the workings of our federation. Before turning to the important productivity-enhancing reforms that we are pursuing in this area, I want to briefly reflect on our federation, the progress that we have made, and why we must do more to deliver on its promise. A healthy and working federation is critical to the lives of all Australians. Both the federal and state governments share responsibility for funding essential services, with states having primary responsibility for service delivery. Over 80% of taxation revenue collected in Australia is by the Commonwealth, with the states receiving on average 45% of their revenue from the Commonwealth. The notion of vertical fiscal imbalance and the notion of horizontal fiscal equalisation has allowed Australian citizens to share equally in the prosperity of our nation, irrespective of the state that they reside in. As a result, a patient in Hobart is able to receive the same quality of care and treatment as a patient in Sydney, even though Tasmania's economy is 1/10 the size of New South Wales. It has been said that if our founding fathers started again with a blank sheet of paper, knowing what we know now, they may have not landed on the federal system that we now have. However, they did, and it can be said that our federation, for all its faults, has served us well. While people in different states have developed and retained a parochialism that can be seen on the football field or the cricket pitch, their overwhelming sense of loyalty and identity is with our nation. Unlike the American experience, which saw unity out of conflict, our pathway to nationhood has seen a peaceful transition which for more than 100 years has remained intact. What is more is that our federation has matured and the barriers have broken down. Systems are now increasingly uniform, be it around taxation, education or transport, where we now have a common approach to aviation, shipping and rail freight. In important areas of the economy like corporations law and the regulation of credit, we now have a national single approach through Commonwealth legislation. But despite this progress, we should be under no illusions about the inefficiencies that exist in our federation and the handbrake it represents on our productivity. This is where we can and we must do better, knowing full well that a new bucket of money will not make our economy more efficient or businesses more productive. As we seek to lift our productivity from its current 5-year average growth rate of 0.6%, Commonwealth and state governments need to work together and to treat the productivity challenge as a national imperative. The Productivity Commission has given us a blueprint for microeconomic reforms with 28 recommendations in the Shifting the Dial report, 22 of which relate to the sole or joint responsibilities of the states. The economic and social dividend from these reforms, which are largely on the supply side of the economy, are immense. Changes to the health sector alone could be worth $140 billion over 2 decades. Cognizant of these opportunities, federal, state and territory treasurers met recently to advance a program of work to boost the nation's productivity. We agreed to develop actionable items in the areas of transport, health, skills and environmental regulation. The work that we do will lay the foundation for the next wave of collaborative reform between the Commonwealth and the states. In transport, heavy vehicle road reform offers a number of potential benefits. It can provide the states with a stable revenue source, transparency for industry, and ultimately lower costs to business and consumers through improved freight productivity. The Transport and Infrastructure Council is developing a nationally consistent service level standard for roads and is considering a number of reforms, including independent price regulation, setting charges on a forward-looking basis, and potential funding reforms to strengthen links between heavy vehicle charges paid and road investments. The Council on Federal Financial Relations recently discussed the heavy vehicle road reforms and agreed the reforms will be a focus for us as part of our program to boost the nation's productivity. In relation to skills, there are significantly potential productivity gains in agreeing to a more nationally consistent approach to funding and quality in the vet sector. By examining skill shortages, the Commonwealth and the states can align their efforts to ensure industry and workers get the skills that they need to succeed in the future. The newly established COAG Skills Council held its inaugural meeting on the 20th of September this year and agreed 3 priorities for vet reform relating to relevance, quality and accessibility. The COAG Skills Council will advise COAG on future reform priorities by the end of this year and provide a reform roadmap by early next year. In addition, in this year's budget, we laid out an $585 million program to deliver skills for today and tomorrow. And we're currently working with the states to co-design the key elements of a package with consultations on a National Skills Commission, which will provide national leadership of the vet sector, 3 pilot skills organisations to work more closely with industry when developing course content and direction, as well as a National Careers Institute and Ambassador, which will centralise and improve education and career information provision. This will continue to be a key area of focus for the Commonwealth. In the area of health, providing funding certainty to public hospitals across states and territories through the finalisation of the next National Health Reform Agreement is critical. The agreement provides for the Commonwealth and the states to commit to long-term reform to help Australians stay in better health so they can get to work and participate in society. We now have 4 Labor and 3 Liberal governments signed up, and we encourage Queensland to join their colleagues to secure more funding for hospitals, patients, and as well as doctors, nurses, and services. We've also signed agreements with 8 state and territory governments on primary health networks, as well as a new round under the Community Health and Hospitals program. Our focus on the environment is critical if we are to streamline our environmental approval processes. We need to address duplication across all levels of government in order to get our major projects up sooner and without compromising our environmental standards. We've just announced a once-in-a-decade review of Australia's environmental law, and it's been estimated that delays in approving environmental approvals and delays are costing the economy around $300 million a year. We have a new Productivity Commission review into the streamlining regulation in the resources sector, and we're pursuing our other reform agendas together between the Commonwealth and the states. Sometimes the states are going it alone. For example, we've seen New South Wales develop their own body of work, which is looking at their tax mix, including payroll tax and stamp duty. In this state as well, the Marshall government is pursuing a range of reforms, including in relation to its land tax settings. At the federal level, we have made significant reforms to our tax system. We've enhanced our competition settings through the Harper Review, and we've recently legislated the Consumer Data Right. As I earlier indicated, we're rolling out a 10-year infrastructure program, which will see major projects in every state and territory. Government's infrastructure plans do not only involve direct Commonwealth funding, but often in partnership with states. And we also are using our tax system to tap the growing pool of global savings for nationally significant projects. So today I have released a Treasury paper which outlines a framework where investors can access a tax rate of 15% instead of the standard 30% which would otherwise apply. To qualify, these major projects will have an estimated capital expenditure of $500 million or more and can cover a vast range of economic infrastructure projects in the areas of transport, energy, communications and water. The application of this tax rate will apply to projects that are in the national interest and that significantly enhance the long-term productive capacity of the economy. This tax incentive, which we have announced today, maintains Australia's competitiveness in a global market where the infrastructure funding gap is estimated to be $15 trillion by 2040. Relevantly, state and territory governments, like here in South Australia, are expected to be the primary applicants for this concession, identifying new projects within their jurisdiction that have a broader national significance. Authorised projects will receive significant benefits, and for every $1 billion of profit generated by such a project, the Commonwealth will be chipping in up to $100 million in foregone revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, As our federation evolves and we work together across all levels of government to meet the challenges such as an ageing and growing population, we must also make sure that the lines of accountability between levels of government are not blurred. We may often have joint responsibility for funding, but we don't always have joint responsibility for delivery. The best case in point is in relation to our schools and hospitals. So despite 28 years of consecutive economic growth, a AAA credit rating, a federal budget that's back in the balance for the first time in 11 years, there is no room for complacency when it comes to our economy. The global economic headwinds that we face here in Australia are real, whether they are the devastating drought at home, which is impacting on the budget, or the global economic headwinds with the trade tensions that are weighing negatively on business and consumer confidence. While we conceived our economic plan as laid out in this year's budget, cognizant of these threats, we must continue to look for every opportunity to take the country forward. Making the Federation work better is essential to this task. It's not about pitting the federal government against the states or the states against each other, but recognising that we're all serving the interests of the same people, 25 million proud Australians. The areas of collaboration that I have highlighted tonight show promise, but it will require a shared resolve, a resolve that was reflected in the commitments made by the Commonwealth and State Treasurers alike at our recent meeting of the Council of Federal Financial Relations. In progressing this agenda, we not only continue to deliver for the economic benefits of all Australians, but we strive to realise the promise of Sir John Downer's vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Treasurer, for that very comprehensive and quietly optimistic forecast for our economic future. Thank you. Josh has very generously agreed to take a question or two. We probably have time for one question. So do we have a mic? We have a mic. So if there's if someone's got that burning question, this is your chance. And if you don't, I know that Peter's got one. So,
Vice Chancellor prerogative.
I got told to have a question. But I'll give you a different one. You've to some extent presented the Australian setup, the Federation, as part of the reason for success, the flexibility we've got. Yet the big competitor that's emerging on the scene is China, and it's organised completely differently. How do you see that playing out in the long run? Do they in the end have a model that's going to be more powerful, or is something going to go wrong with it?
Well, clearly we have very different political systems and indeed very different economic systems, and the success of the Chinese economy has been remarkable, double-digit economic growth for decades, and now that their economy is growing 5 to 6%, but it's growing off a much bigger base. So actually the economic growth is even bigger than it was when it was 10% growth, because now the base is that much bigger. It's critical to the Australian economy's strength that we maintain a strong relationship with China. Our two-way trade was over $200 billion last year. 1/3 of our exports go to China. We're now seeing a vast number of Chinese tourists visit Australia, a vast number of Chinese students study in Australia, and as they move up the income scale, our services exports, not just our agriculture and our mining, our services exports become a lot more attractive to them, whether it's health, education, tourism, or indeed financial services. So what we need to do is maintain the strength of that relationship. Now, we have a lot of things that China needs for it to continue to grow, and I'm not just talking about iron ore for the steel plants, I'm talking more broadly. So I think it's in both countries' interest that that relationship strengthens. We will have differences because of our political systems, because of some other national interests, and as long as we're clear and consistent as to where those lines are and to where our positions are on certain issues, I think that will hold us in good stead. But Alexander obviously would know a lot more about China than most, but the view I have about China is you have to look back at their history as a guide to their future. And in China, and Henry Kissinger wrote a very powerful book called On China, and he pointed out that of the last 2,000 years, the Chinese economy was the largest in the world for 1,800 of those years. And it was only with the Industrial Revolution that China got overtaken by the West. And they had obviously the Opium Wars and the tragedies of Nanking, and it was really a century plus of humiliation. So for them now, they don't see themselves as becoming the largest economy in the world for the first time. They see themselves as recovering from where they were. And I think that's really important to understanding China. They're a country that has more, I think it's got around 20 different neighbours that are land boundaries. They've only had a few major conflicts. They had one with India, they've had one, the Korean War, but they haven't been often involved in global conflicts, and they have a huge diaspora. So obviously I'm concerned what's happening in Hong Kong. Obviously, they've got a very different political system, and Xi Jinping is a much stronger leader than maybe they've had in recent past. But from Australia's perspective, we need to ensure that relationship stays in good order, because they're not only important to our economic future, but they're also important to the stability in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll ask you to sit down just for a minute. Clearly we could talk about some of these subjects for another hour, but we don't have that luxury, I'm afraid. But it is now my very great pleasure to ask former Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Alexander Downer, to come forward and on behalf of the Downer family and the audience here today, to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you, Alexander.
Well, Acting Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer, other ministers, MPs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all say that it's a great honour for us as a Downer family to host this evening's Downer Lecture, which we have, as you heard from the Vice-Chancellor, have done since 2012 and will continue to do every other year for many years to come. The reason we do this is not about our family as a whole, but in particular to honour the memory of Sir John Downer. Now, in this country, I don't think we do a great deal to understand and to remember our history. As we now struggle to try to understand Indigenous history and understand it much better than we've ever done before, and we should be doing that, we should also try to understand the history of the evolution of modern Australia. Because as Josh was saying in relation to China, and I'll come back to this, makes a very good point, referring to Henry Kissinger's very famous book on China, which, by the way, if you're interested in China, is well worth a read. But as he said, countries are defined and peoples are defined by their history. And if you don't know the history of your country, and you don't know the history of your culture and your civilization, then you are really going to struggle to understand what is happening today in your country and why it's happening, and importantly, why people have the attitudes that they have. So we would like the one member of our family who played a significant role in designing the Federation. It's true he wasn't alone, and it is true, it's a great saying that every success has 1,000 fathers and every failure is an orphan. So he, along with 1,000 other fathers, well, there were 3 of them on the Constitutional Drafting Committee, the final Constitutional Drafting Committee, he, Barton and O'Connor. We would like him to be remembered in one sense. We would like in particular the way the Constitution was designed, the reason it was designed as it was, and the role Sir John Downer played in helping to take the state of South Australia forward in the different capacities, including on 2 occasions being the Premier. I want to thank Josh very warmly for coming along here today. As he said, Josh and I go back, we go back for decades really. When I first knew Josh, he had a huge amount of hair. I don't know, he weighed 65 kilos. He was as fit as a racehorse, as they say. And, you know, he is a bit younger than me, so he occasionally got the edge in tennis. We spent a huge amount of time together travelling around the world, where we did very serious work, and we also had a lot of fun. I remember, you know, playing tennis everywhere from Santiago to Chile to Davos, the World Economic Forum. I remember us preparing for major meetings, focusing on policy development, debating ideas, endlessly debating ideas, and ploughing through books and articles to try to understand why countries are doing what they're doing. I used to say to Josh, it's good to have Alan Tudge here too, because he went to the Alexander Downer School of Politics for a couple of years, as did many other members of the Cabinet. And other MPs, great students that they all were. I have to say, Josh is pretty much at the top of the class now, having achieved the position of treasurer. But I used to say to them that you need to be in public life forensic. You need to understand the facts. You shouldn't just be guessing. You must read. You must ask questions. You must try your very best to understand. We'd sit in question time meetings, and there would be slanging matches where I was saying to them, be forensic. Why do you think that? What evidence do you have? What are the facts? I think Sir John Downer was probably like that, having been, well, in those days, dare I say it, a KC as well as a QC. But Josh, I know, has subsequently become increasingly forensic, and as you all know, has done a wonderful job. He is also somebody who worked for me who had tremendous energy and determination. He was always going to succeed. But I used to wonder whether if he became a Member of Parliament, he would be tough enough. How would he put up with the huge amount of abuse you have to put up with in public life? And by the way, I don't for a minute, unlike most commentators, think this is anything new. I imagine that Sir John Downer was absolutely trashed, as was my father, and occasionally I have been. And you know what? And as we always say, so what? So what they say. We're not trying to be actors. We're not trying to get the approbation of the critics. We're trying to make changes and make a difference and make the state and the country a better place. And if people are critical, well, why don't they themselves put their hands up and see if they too can make a contribution instead of just a contribution of criticism? And I wondered, I often wonder how people are going to take all of this. And I wondered how Josh would. And I reckon over the last few years since he's been the member for Kooyong and eventually becoming a minister and a cabinet minister, he has taken it incredibly well. And he's turned out to be a good deal tougher than I ever thought he'd be. Well, do you think eventually perhaps ruthless? You could be ruthless. I don't know about ruthless because that's pejorative, but certainly very tough and very effective. So it's wonderful to see him doing so well. And as you can tell from listening to his speech tonight, he's certainly learnt to be forensic. It's full of detail and full of facts. Not only should you have been listening to it, but you should take it away and read it and understand so many different aspects of the Australian economy. Not just luxuriate in sloganeering, but have a look at the facts. Examine the facts and be forensic. And you too can be very successful. So thank you, Josh, very much for coming over to Adelaide and for making this wonderful contribution. And I have a little gift for you.
Thank you, Alexander, and thank you for your family's generosity in continuing to support the Sir John Downer Oration. We're very grateful. Alexander, over the years, has also lectured to many of our students, and you can see why they find him inspiring and ask for him back. Anyway, Alexander has presented Josh with a book, which he's unwrapping right now, entitled Supreme Federalist, The Political Life of Sir John Downer, which was written by former South Australian Premier and University of Adelaide alumnus, the late Honourable Dr. John Bannon, AO. If you're interested in learning more about Sir John Downer's extraordinary contribution to the political life of our nation, as Alexander has said, you need to read, I encourage you to seek out Wakefield Press, the award-winning Adelaide publisher of the book. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the oration for this evening. And can I thank you all again for joining us today, and especially our thanks to the Downer family and our orator, the Honourable Josh Frydenberg MP. Thank you.